Good evening, friends, and shalom, and blessings to you all in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Welcome to this episode of Un-Apologetics, the show where we are unapologetic about apologetics, and I am your host, CJ Cox. I want to thank everybody who is here for being here, as well as anybody who is going to be showing up here in the near future. I want to remind you guys, if you are here, please remember to like and share this. Ooh, I did not want that. Sorry. Please remember to like and share this video. Please remember to get this out to all the different social media platforms which you frequent. Of course, what good is a message without an audience to hear it? Please consider subscribing if you have not done so. If you like this content and are interested by my apologetics work, please consider not only subscribing, but hitting that bell to get notified of every time that we go live. And today will be another open mic, though it will not be open topic. This is part 3 and the last part of my response, review, after show, whatever you want to call it, to the 80 Robles and Ruslan KD conversation. So I want to go ahead and announce all that kind of stuff. But of course, we're kind of stalling for time here a little bit so that we can have a couple people go ahead and join in. Excuse me. I also do have to actually drop the link in the description because I do not at this point in time have am I on the right one? What is my just a second. I don't know what's going on here, but for some reason I have one thing saying that I'm live and another thing saying that I'm not, and I know that I am live, so I'm not sure why this other thing is saying that I'm not, but it doesn't even matter. So anyways, let me go ahead and drop the link to not only the video I'm responding to, but also the link to the StreamYard here, both into the live chat. I do see Kevin Blah and Nicholas brothers, I should say. Thank you for being here. Anybody else who is here, whenever you guys decide to chime in. If you do decide to chime in, thank you very much for being here. This obviously should be a good one, hopefully. So we'll go ahead and get right into some of it. Actually, hang on. No, I do have some things that I do need to announce as far as channel housekeeping, just to keep you guys informed, right? So first things first, I do want to let you guys know that I am currently in the process of planning numerous debates. Of course, you guys already know about the 2 that I have over on Standing for Truths, one with Sky Out on whether or not the Bible teaches a young earth, and one with Praise on whether or not the Canaan conquests are hyperbolized. I am taking the position the Bible does indeed teach a young earth and that the conquests of Canaan are not hyperbolized. So you'll find both of those over there. I've also just got confirmation, though it's not quite set up yet, that I will be debating Rob Rowe for a second time. Oh, I dropped the link to the video in the live chat. Sorry. Anyways, so I'm going to go ahead and get that dropped in there. Sorry. I did, though, get confirmation. I will be on the Gospel Truth debating Rob Rowe for a second time. This time we're going to be talking about whether or not the Bible allows for death before the fall. Now, of course, there's 2 different versions of yes to that question, both of which I disagree with because I would take the negative. I don't think that the Bible does allow for death before the fall. But there are those like Kenny Rhodes and Hugh Ross who would say the Bible does allow for animal death before the fall, though not human death. And then there would be theistic evolutionists such as Rob Rowe, who I'll be debating, as well as Inspiring Philosophy and others, who would say that the Bible does allow for human death before the fall, but not anatomically modern human death before the fall, at least if my understanding of their beliefs is correct. In other words, that is to say that they believe that human beings were evolving through a bunch of different species throughout the genus of Homo, and that eventually we got to modern humans that were nefesh or soul-like, that would be chosen by God in some sort of not special creation, but special choosing event. And so that'll be a fun conversation. That one's not for quite some time, though. It's going to be December 29th of this year. But nonetheless, that'll be fun. I do want to also let you guys know about a couple things that are coming here in the future. I have 2 more videos of Ruslans that I really want to respond to. I have a series of arguments by Dr. David Falk that I want to respond to. I have a whole bunch of miscellaneous topics that I want to discuss, including but not limited to suicide and depression from a biblical perspective, addiction from a biblical perspective, pornography from a biblical perspective, men's role in things like lust and stuff like that, because we do often hyper focus on women. So many other things to be talking about. So I'm going to be hopefully cranking out content here on this particular channel a lot. On top of that, I do have a lot more debates and interviews that are not actually quite set yet that I am hopefully going to get set pretty soon. So if you guys are interested in any of that stuff, please do consider subscribing, getting that bell notified. I haven't quite told you yet about the Phil Fox interview, but just to remind you guys once more, I will be interviewing Phil Fox very soon on being Native American and Christian. So, by the way, I do have Brother Nicholas here with us today. Shalom, man. Thank you for being here.
Shalom.
And so, Nicholas was actually with basically the whole time on our last video. If you guys don't recall, this is a part 3. So, there are 2 previous response videos to this same video that deal with the first 52 minutes. Really, it's 37 minutes of it, because the first 15 minutes is just them going back and forth about their respective stories. But nonetheless, if you guys are interested in that, I'll go ahead and drop links in the description real quick. And go ahead. You sounded like you had something to say there. My apologies.
Oh, I was just going to say 52, but well, you know, for the timestamp.
Yeah, we have a pretty convenient timestamp here today of 52 minutes and 52 seconds. So that's pretty cool. And for those who may not recall, and if, by the way, if you have not seen either the interview that AD did with Ruslan or my previous 2 reviews, like installments of review, if you will, I would certainly recommend that you watch those. Perhaps not necessarily in order. That's perfectly fine if you don't want to do it in order, but I would certainly recommend that you watch those. But for those who don't know and would like to go ahead forward with this one, to give you some brief recap of where we've been so far, the first video is primarily me vocalizing a disagreement with AD on whether or not racism is an essential. And the second video is primarily me, and as well as Brother Nicholas here as well, vocalizing disagreement with Ruslan. And a lot of it has to do with his methodology when it comes to answering questions. We haven't gotten to a lot, although there is some in there, such as his views on female eldership and stuff like that. We haven't gotten to a lot of the big problems with Ruslan, but we got to some of the stuff as far as, like I said, his support of elders in the female elders and female pastors. Although he wouldn't word it that way, it did eventually get to the point that it was kind of shown, yes, at least in some circumstances, he is okay with female pastors and female, I guess not female elders, I should clarify there, but definitely female pastors in certain circumstances. And then there was also a lot about his methodology, namely his just inability to answer questions straightforward. Like Ruslan, for example, asked him, well, what do you think about, or excuse me, AD asked him, well, what do you think about this person who would potentially have all these hypothetical racist qualities? Could you have unity with him? And Ruslan's response was, well, I think a lot of people do. And of course, that's not an answer to the question. The question is, what do you believe? But nonetheless, that's kind of where we're at so far. Very brief overview. And of course, we're going to jump right into the 52 here in a moment. But if there's anything else you wanted to say beforehand, go ahead.
Yeah, I think one more thing that we addressed was wokeism in general and that influence on the church in general. And then somewhat of approaching any sort of false teaching or apostasy or heresy problem. So we were around on those topics some too.
Yeah, and again, I will drop links to both of those in the description here in a moment.
And I presume so far you have not had a chance to see the John Harris video yet?
Actually, I have. I actually was able to watch both of them.
Oh, okay. Nice.
So, yeah, so that was definitely a positive thing there. I don't know if it's... My computer might not allow me to actually get to 52. Oh, there it is. Yep, 52. All right. Awesome. It was going to kind of finagle between 52:48 and 52:56, but I actually got it on the 52:52 there. But at any rate, so yeah, we're going to go ahead and jump right into this, friends. Very interesting conversations here, of course, to be had. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy. Well, yeah, that's about it. Let's go ahead and get into it.
Well, that's fine. If you think about it, that's okay.
Wait a minute. Hang on. I got to redo this so that I'm only sharing the tab. That way I can still go back and forth and mute and stuff like that. My apologies, friends. I only actually recently learned that was a trait or whatever you would say to that, feature. So, yeah, I apologize for not always remembering that. AD Shepherd's-Meyer and something like that. All right. Cool. So, just to make sure you can see this screen with AD and Ruslan right now, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. I got that confirmed. Awesome. Let's get right into this, friends.
So what would you say about someone who teaches from the pulpit that it's okay to be covetous, it's okay to lack forgiveness? Would you say that that person is that an essential or non-essential?
It's okay to be covetous? Or
it's okay to be covetous, engage in covetousness, lacking forgiveness, that's also okay. Would you say that that's an essential or a non-essential?
I would say they're in error. And I would say, if I had heard it, I would probably unpack it with them. Why do you feel this way?
Okay, so in non-essential then, Liberty.
Are you saying? Can you have Christians on platforms that are in error? And
sorry, friends. So right out the gate in this particular episode, we're gonna see. Obviously, this is 52 minutes into the actual video, but for this episode, it's right out the gate. We see AD kind of coming in with some heat, right? Not in the sense that he's being like aggressive or anything like that, but in the sense that he's asking a pretty pointed, pretty important question, trying to get down to some nitty gritty as to what exactly Ruslan considers to be essential. Now I have no doubt that me and AD probably disagree on what would be considered essential just based on some of the previous things I've already responded to. But this is an example of Ruslan almost appearing to be unwilling to say that essentiality exists almost at all. He's not willing to just straightforward say, no, a pastor can't preach that it's okay to be unforgiving and covetous. He instead kind of needs to tap dance around it a little bit and find a way. Well, what exactly do you mean by essential? What are you trying to say here? Are you saying that like somebody can't be in error? And that's not a particularly honest way of answering the question, in my opinion. I think it shows that Ruslan's tent, it's not that it's too big. It's almost that it doesn't really exist, right? Tents do have borders of some kind, and Ruslan almost appears to not have borders. I guess so long as you claim the title of Christian. And that's bothersome to me for certain. But yeah, I just wanted to note that real quick because it's something that we're seeing right out the gate.
I think unforgiveness is something I said yesterday, right? Or maybe it was the day before, the last time.
I think that unforgiveness was referenced in the one before because we were talking a little bit about like racism and Eric Mason and stuff like that. But I don't think that it was brought up in the self-same way as it is right now here. It might have been, though. I guess I don't really remember.
Well, and I've seen this before, and, AD has been a big brother for me along this whole thing. So I'm not saying I didn't get it from him, or that I did, because what really matters is, it's biblical.
Right.
And that's why I've stuck with AD's channel, because he is biblical.
Yeah, and of course, the way that Ruslan words it is something that I would agree with, right? He says, well, yeah, I mean, believers are allowed to be in error on certain things and still be considered believers. And that's, of course, 100% true. And you can even extend it farther, right? A believer can still definitely have an issue with covetousness or with unforgiveness. Obviously, God doesn't work on every single sin the very first day that you were saved. But the context, namely the question that AD asked, kind of paints this all in a different perspective, right? It was a very pointed, very clear question. Do you think somebody can preach that it's okay to be covetous from the pulpit, or preach that it's okay to have hate in your heart from the pulpit, or not have forgiveness in your heart from the pulpit? And that should be a no-brainer, in my opinion, right? That should be something that's incredibly clear. We all agree, no, that's not cool. But for some reason, for Ruslan, that's not that obvious. I don't get it personally.
Did you actually not get it at all? Because I think I can say what it is that wokeness is all about covetousness and lack of forgiveness for what happened in the past. And so if he were to concede that point, then suddenly everything would collapse. He would have to switch sides, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess I could see, like, if he's already thought it through, that could potentially be the case. I wasn't really coming at this assuming that he had necessarily thought all the implications of this all the way through.
Well,
he
has seen AD do 12 videos on him. He mentioned that.
Right.
So there's a lot of thinking this stuff through that in those videos, if that makes sense.
Well, and the only reason I'm even saying that is just to say, like, I feel like if he's already concluded what I think is the logical conclusion and still supports these kinds of things, then that's obviously a different beast than if he is just naive or even highly deluded. And I know there's a little bit of a back and forth that me and you have had both privately and publicly as to whether or not Ruslan is genuine. I don't know. I just get this feeling that he is. He seems to me to be like a more naive person than a dishonest person. I do admit he's got some weird inability to, like, be able to just honestly answer questions, and I get that for sure, because that's certainly, I don't know. It appears dishonest, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to group things by spiritual, so then I concern for what's spiritually going on with him with that. But I am, going to try to go sort of more the direction that John Harris was talking about, where it's like, for when it comes to having standards of public ministry in the church, I think we should make a distinction between whether it's about the individual or whether it's about a standard of public ministry and speaking on that. Because those are just two very different standards in Scripture, and rightly so. And, public ministry in this information age, the better that we can do to hold each other accountable properly, as church, then I think that's very important. And we don't necessarily just have the church institutions of the previous decades to lean on. We have seen that that's not there. So now we have to do it according to the Bible.
Yeah, and I did like John Harris's thing about saying that, whether or not somebody is saved very often is the question, but it's not supposed to be the question. In other words, it's like the question that people seem to be asking, but it's not the actual question that should be asked. Paul obviously rebuked Peter to his face. That didn't mean Peter was saved. It doesn't mean Peter was unsaved. It was just simply that Paul was saying that Peter was excuse me, teaching false doctrine with the Judaizing and all that. And actually, I think John Harris said that he was only covering for the Judaizers, but I don't think that's accurate. I'm going to have to double check on that. I meant to after I watched the video. But I think
it's kind of a weird way of characterizing it, I think. But yeah, it's a bit of a tangent.
Yeah, exactly. So I won't go too into it right now. But I meant to look it up after I watched it, and I just never did. But the point just being that I agreed with him on that, right? That the question shouldn't be so much about whether or not Ruslan is saved, and should be more about whether or not what Ruslan is saying is the truth, right? Or if it's false doctrine.
Yeah, and I'll just say that I think Ruslan is aware of that, and that is why he has to maneuver out of it here. And it's not something that's obscure for people who are like in it, you know? And yeah, so I don't think it's but it is obscure for people who are not in it so regularly, as far as paying as much attention to it, because I think there is a couple different levels of how automatically people pick up on things, depending on if they're really versed in it or if they just vaguely understand what it is, but their time's been, focused elsewhere, right?
Well, and of course that is part of it. And I know another part of it too is just, and let's just be honest about something. I'll be honest about this, right? Though Ruslan is probably more your generation age-wise, like he probably is actually literally your generation, he acts like one more from mine. And that is obviously something that is always going to cause sympathy and nostalgia and all that sort of stuff, right? So, in other words, I know a lot of people who are a lot like Ruslan. I've been a lot like Ruslan, you know what I mean? Like he acts a lot like a 25 and younger year old kid.
Yeah, and that's interesting for AD and I. AD and I are about the same age, and we're
so
more.
Ruslan, I think too. I think he's about your age as well.
Yeah, exactly. But like for Ruslan to be so much in tune with these times, but AD and I are rather devout Christians, so we're not really in tune with the times because we're not this time in our life. Neither of us is really in tune with the world so much in that way. And I don't mean for it to sound accusatory, but that is basically what it seems to be, is that woke people are either specifically woke or they're kind of in tune with the world instead of Christianity. I think that's a fair generalization to.
And I think that's often true. Certainly, I think a lot of people who are culturally Christian, and I mean that not even just with actually the woke crowd, but even also a lot of the culturally conservative Christian. You can see that in like their idols, right? In that like they tend to idolize figures rather than
that's a fair spiritual point, because I always emphasize you have to trust Jesus. That's salvation. So it's like if conservatism is done in the wrong spirit, that's still not worshiping in spirit and truth, even if it agrees a lot more with the Bible. The thing is to really put our trust in the person of Jesus and to be spiritually there, I'll let the scripture say the rest so that we don't get off on too much of a tangent, but yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just finish it briefly with this. You guys have heard me rant and rave about how much I adore C.S. Lewis as a philosopher. If that actually turned into something that was greater than that, like for example, I became a Lewisite, right, rather than a Christian, that would become a big problem. If I was unwilling to look at, for example, Lewis's feeling that Esther was probably divine allegory rather than something that actually happened. If I were to take that and say, well, Lewis said it, so it must be true, even though it seems to contradict the clear teaching of Scripture, that would be a problem, right? And that's an example of it happening on the conservative side, which does actually happen. I use that specific example because that specific example happens. It happens to Martin Luther all the time and John Wesley all the time and a whole bunch of other conservative figures, because obviously men are flawed, and every time that somebody finds something stupid that one of these men said, I mean, no disrespect, they run with it, and it's because they idolize men rather than idolizing. Well, you shouldn't call it idolizing, rather than worshiping the one true God, of course. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and get right back into the video here. We've been talking definitely for a moment.
Yeah, well, let's just to bring it back onto focus about forgiveness, right? That teaching woke ideology, AD is making the insinuation, and I agree with it, that any of this woke preaching is to teach unforgiveness and to teach covetousness. And I think it's very specifically the message of 1 Timothy chapter 6, which is why I've been going there so often, because it's important for these times. But I'll leave it there.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and drop the play here. Again, friends, want to remind you guys, please do like, please do share. Link is in the live chat pinned, and let's jump right back into it.
Am I allowed to fellowship with them and have dialogue with them? Is that the question?
Well, I'm using sort of,
you
yeah,
go
like
over multiple examples. I mean, just get to the question. Do I think that
You
people
do
can be in
echo,
error
brother.
and we can still welcome them in?
Oh, right. Sorry. I keep forgetting that. That's the whole reason I have two tabs open, and I forgot about it.
Brothers, even though they're in error. And I'm telling you, yes, we can, and we can unpack those things and we
Sure.
talk about those ideas.
so non-essential in the sense like we can have liberty there. We can hash it out. When I say non-essential, I don't mean unimportant. I mean that liberty to disagree on some of that stuff is what you're saying.
I think we have liberty to disagree on a number of topics that should be hashed out and should be talked about, as long as.
Now, real quick, I want to say that that's another one of those things where it's like, okay, I agree with that, right? If in the sense that I agree with those words, right? If you just, and this is something it's an interesting trick I've noticed. I don't know if it's actually a trick or if it's something that is just a thing that people kind of do, and it just so happens that everybody does it. But it could be a trick. And it's basically, it's where you say things that are definitionally accurate, right? So, for example, the sentence, I think that we have liberty to disagree on a number of things, is accurate. That is an accurate statement. But the context again, right, is he was just asked a question about whether or not he thinks it's okay for somebody to preach unforgiveness and hate from the pulpit. And that obviously makes this different. That makes that sentence not really mean what it would mean at face value. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like that in and of itself is a problematic thing, because when you're saying things that I can't just take for what they are, and it appears to be like deceitful in a way, whether it is because of naivety or because of actual deceit, it is a problem. Bare minimum, you need to clean up the way that you communicate with people. And I don't know, you have anything else to say on that before I press play again?
No, not at the moment.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and go right back here. I see, by the way, Kelby Cuello and Rebuke and Reprove are in the live chat. Shalom to both of you. Thank you for being here. Link is in the live chat if you want to join. If not, please do enjoy the show.
As we aren't slandering and misrepresenting people's actual positions, which is my actual issue with you, AD.
Got it.
I think you've misrepresented me in what my position is, and that's okay. and that's my actual issue. I don't have a problem with you attacking ideas or mocking ideas. I think that's fair game. I think you should, if you think ideas are stupid. But when you're attributing false ideas to people that don't hold those values, I think that's misrepresentative and slanderous. I don't think it's indicative of the fruit of the Spirit. I don't think it's indicative of how.
Now, for context, what is being talked about, for those who may not know, is AD called Ruslan a liberal. I personally would use the word progressive. I think it's a more accurate descriptor, but it's the same general idea, right? And he was talking theologically. He said that Ruslan would be a liberal theologically, and they went back and forth about whether or not that was true. Got into a conversation about female pastors, whether or not they could preach on Sunday. Whole conversation about that in the previous episode. But The important takeaway here is that Ruslan believes that AD has slandered him by calling him a liberal. Now, I understand that people like myself, AD, Brother Nicholas, Spencer Smith, a couple others, right? We're pretty plain with our belief that the scripture is true in a fundamentalist sense. I think the only one of those people I just mentioned who doesn't actually claim the title fundamentalist is AD. And even then, he doesn't have a problem with it. He just doesn't outright declare that he is one.
Well, I want to for us to disclaimer Spencer a bit, because he, even though the Bible clearly teaches otherwise, he claims that any drinking of alcohol is a sin. And since that's specifically just not biblical, that's a little different than the rest of us. But I like to think anyway.
Yeah, I guess it's probably a little influenced by he's a Southern boy, right? And so that's a kind of a something you see in Southern Christianity is super, super big on temperance. But at any rate, I just wanted to point out that, you know, as far as like owning the title fundamentalist, right? AD he's not in that camp, but that's like the only thing that differentiates him from people who would consider themselves to be deeply fundamentalist is that title, that wearing of the badge.
Well, he just needs to have a beer with us, and we could fix it. Well, I don't know if you can have beer, but I can have a beer.
Yeah, I'm personally I'm not a drinker anymore. But it is, to be clear though, it is true that moderated use of alcohol is absolutely permitted in the Bible. Obviously, drunkenness is not, right? But that's a different category. But so AD is, you know, people who are to the left of people like ourselves and AD. Obviously, that's a big group. And it doesn't include everybody who's actually progressive. And I understand that. I understand there are people to the left of me, both theologically and politically, if we're being honest. But right now I'm talking theologically, who are not actually left. Freely acknowledge that. But the question is Ruslan one of those person? The question is Ruslan one of those persons, I guess, is what I was trying to say, or people. I like the word persons, though. It's a funny word and is technically grammatically accurate. Anyways, Ruslan has said some pretty out there liberal things. Obviously, there was the whole conversation about female pastors, but my biggest thing, the thing that actually got me to unsubscribe from Ruslan, was his saying that it was okay for a certain woman to be twerking in public, not just in public in the sense that she was in a room of nearly 400 people. I might have that number wrong, but it was hundreds. But also it was posted on Instagram, her Instagram to be precise. And he was basically making the argument that that was cool because it was a cultural thing, because she was from this ghetto kind of culture, basically. I mean, if we're just going to be honest with it, right? Because you could say black culture, but if we're being real, it's just hood culture, right? It doesn't really matter your color. It's more where you're from, but nonetheless. And that was like, I mean, if that's not a quote progressive position, I personally am not aware of what progressivism means. If that's not a liberal position, then somebody needs to just educate CJ as to what exactly liberalism is, because that to me is like, of course you're a liberal. If you think that something that is blatantly sin is totally cool because it's a culturally significant thing for the person doing it, that would be a liberal position. And in fact, it would be a biblical and sinful position, I'd like to point out, as most liberal positions are, if we're being honest about it. I mean, the liberal positions are almost never correct when it comes to theology. I don't know of an instance where they are correct when it comes to theology, if I'm being honest with you. That's not even like the worst thing that I'm sure anybody can think of. That's just the worst thing that I in particular can think of, and the thing that got me to unsubscribe, right? But then, of course, there is this thing about, you know, female eldership, or female pastors rather, which is it's not he could be more liberal, certainly, but it's a liberal position. There's a couple others that aren't coming to mind right now, but I do know there was some others that I was thinking about, but they're not coming to my mind at the moment. Nonetheless, the point is there is a consistent pattern of what ecumenism. That's what it was. Ecumenism. Ruslan's very ecumenical, incredibly ecumenical.
Well, at that point, that's perennialism. If you're accepting twerking.
Well, you could, yeah, I mean, right? That's one of those things where it's like you definitely are you're getting outside of the Christian ethic for sure. But I do mean in the sense, I don't know if he's actually said anything that is perennialist in the literal sense, where he's like,
well, no, I was playing with the words there.
Oh no,
yeah.
I know what you mean for sure. Because that is a good point, right? It's like that is outside of the Bible kind of thinking, right? That is Ruslan failing to think as Christians think. To quote actually Nicholas in an old video from his. But he's also very.
I took down that video though because the person's conclusion may have been relatively more fair and stuff, and my perspective has changed a lot. So that's that.
For sure. But the point though that I'm trying to make here, as far as the ecumenism, right, as Ruslan is real down with, being cool with Catholicism, being cool with Eastern Orthodoxy, being cool with different interpretations of the communion, which, that's not one of those things that I think is fleshed out properly in the modern day. But if you actually look at what Catholic understanding of Mass is, as well as a couple other churches' understandings of communion, they believe that they are basically re-sacrificing God every single time they take communion. To be more specific, re-sacrificing the Son Jesus. But obviously, you guys hopefully knew what I meant.
Yeah, well, they refer to it by representing the sacrifice, so that's their word salad way around it. Just to acknowledge.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you, because it is important to get their exact words correct. But that's not actually, in my opinion, something that we can ignore. That is a salvation issue. Hebrews is quite clear that to sacrifice the Lord a second time is impossible. You can't do it.
Well, you haven't seen me address the Frank Turek clip that involves this, have you?
I think I did. Was that on your? Maybe I didn't.
Well, I did.
Was that on your last State of the Church?
Yeah, I guess that probably is where it was. Yeah,
I think I did then.
Okay.
Yeah, because you were talking about how he just totally biffed on this answer with a Catholic girl, right? Or talking about her Catholic mother, actually, is what it was.
Yeah, and that was one of a few different, really unacceptable responses.
Yeah, and that was actually, let me be clear. I mean, that was, look, you can't get that question wrong. That one is specifically addressed in Hebrews. You cannot sacrifice the Lord a second time.
Well, he said, let her do any ritual she wants as long as she has accepted Jesus for salvation. So it's like, so if she says she's accepted Jesus for salvation, she can circumcise herself into the old covenant deliberately and then sacrifice animals for the atonement of sins deliberately. Like any ritual is okay.
Well, and that is a distinctly Catholic position, just for the record, right? The 2019 Amazonian Synod, we won't get too deep into that, but that is what at least the Francis Episcopate has said, that basically any sort of rites, rites, are totally cool in worship of the self-same God.
That is the definition of perennialism.
Yeah, that is quite literally perennialism right there, right?
Yep.
But the point just being that Ruslan he's very ecumenical. He's very into, being soft on social issues. I saw, Kelvy dropped in here that he was talking about how Bono was a good role model for Christians.
Bono is really Luciferian, like, a pretty Satanist fellow, and has theatricized it sometimes throughout his career. Sometimes some things may be more subtle, but it is what it is.
I'll be honest, I don't really know much about Bono, so I just can't comment there. But for those who do know about Bono, I'm sure that I don't have any reason. Both you and Kelvy are people who I
There's
do have
people who
respect for,
expose
so.
this stuff, you know, and then
Yeah.
if you're a writer-offer, then you have a way of writing it off, like it doesn't matter. But otherwise, you'll be concerned with what you see. If you check out, you know, there's people can check it out if they want.
Yeah, and so on and so forth, right? Like the point just being that Ruslan may not want to own the title of liberal, but I don't think that it's accurate to say it's slander. You could say I don't appreciate it, and that's fine. At that point, AD does have the choice of whether or not he's going to call you something you appreciate because it's or something you don't appreciate because it's accurate, or he's not. That's obviously his decision. Does he value the truth, or does he value the way you feel? That's obviously his decision, right? But as far as like calling it slanderous or saying it's dishonest or a lie or something like that, that's just not true. I mean, Ruslan, you have demonstrated, I say you as if he's ever going to watch this, but liberal positions over and over and over and over again, whether, like I said, it be ecumenism, the twerk thing, the female eldership thing, so on and so forth. By the way, shaloms to Richard Madsen, Jimmy Wright, and Sandy. Thank you all for being here. Again, just want to remind you guys, link is in the live chat. It's not an open topic, but it is an open mic. We're talking about the video here that we're watching today, though. If you guys want to join, please feel free to. If you want to just sit and listen, please do enjoy. Anything else you want to add before I press play again?
No, let's get to it.
Cool.
Oh, Christ would have you speak. Who told us that we will give an account for every word that comes out of our mouth?
Yeah. Oh, I understand.
Okay.
But again, I mean, you haven't answered the question. I really want an answer to
I
it.
answered the question to you, AD. I answered it
so
five
yes.
different ways. So
you didn't.
Can somebody be in error? You're in error to me, AD. You're in error
Right.
to me based on the way you make videos. That the vast
Sure.
majority of your videos are about other brothers in the faith. The vast majority of your videos are more about what you're against than what you're for. That you barely teach from the Bible on your platform. I understand it's a social justice. I'm going to dunk on social justice. I think you're in error, AD. I really do. But I would not remove fellowship from you. I would bring it to you, and I would hope that, hey, man, can we find some common ground on these issues?
Right.
So I'm exhibiting the very thing you're asking me of. Like I'm literally doing. I'm literally trying to be here and be charitable and communicate with you because I genuinely care about you as a brother in the faith.
I understand that you're trying to be charitable here, but the reality is that I really have a hard time thinking that you've answered my question. But I'll go with it. So essentially, yes, people can be in error.
See, I do like that. AD said essentially yes and just ran with it because the thing is, I do think Ruslan did actually answer the question, and AD is coming to the right conclusion. Now, Ruslan tap danced around the question, and he never gave any actual straightforward answer, and AD is right to call him on that. And it's a consistent problem that I have with Ruslan throughout this interview. But there is kind of like if you read between the lines.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yes.
If we read between the lines, then, I mean, if we really dig into it, it's sort of like, okay, I think we have to read he's conceding that Eric Mason, for instance, has preached from the pulpit multiple times unforgiveness and covetousness. And he's conceding that. And then, so what did he say about it exactly? That it's the sort of, what's his conclusion about it? I mean, we chopped it up a little bit, so that might be part of why.
Are you talking about AD's or Ruslan's? Just to clarify.
Ruslan's conclusion about it.
Yeah, Ruslan's conclusion was, you can be in error, and I would basically still fellowship with you, though I think we should hash this out. That's what Ruslan is saying. If you just cut the crap, right, and get down to the
but if you're preaching unforgiveness and covetousness from the pulpit, and when people try to correct you, you have other priorities so that you just continue to preach unforgiveness and covetousness of all things, right? And especially unforgiveness, because we do have specifically what Jesus says about you're measured by what you measure out to others, and if you don't forgive others, your Father won't forgive you. And exactly. I'm not necessarily trying to take that too rigidly or something, but I am saying that he said those things, and so it does matter. And for a teacher, that's especially bad. And then we should speak appropriately about that teacher. They should be spoken about appropriately in public so that it's beneficial, so that public discourse is beneficial, right? So that's truthful. Like, I don't know, Ruslan has nothing left to stand on because that's really bad, isn't it? Come on.
It is. Like, it is absolutely terrible to not be able to just simply say, no, somebody is not able to preach unforgiveness from the pulpit. Just like somebody is not able to preach acceptance of polyamory from the pulpit, just like somebody is not able to preach ethnic hatred from the pulpit. Like, those are not allowed, right? I would agree. Although I think that you're talking about people who are definitely not wearing the Christian uniform, that's for sure. But I would agree that it is absolutely possible for people to be backslidden to the point of being involved in those sins, or to be struggling with sins like that and still be Christians. Because only God knows. We don't know the future. We don't know people's hearts. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of things to go in there, right? But that's not what we're talking about. Right, we're talking about is it cool for somebody to preach this stuff on Sunday? Is basically the question that AD is asking.
And by cool, CJ means acceptable enough to allow.
Exactly. Thank you. I'm using kind of 23-year-old language there, I guess.
No, it's fine, but there's just different specific meanings it could have, and I felt the specific meaning mattered.
Yeah, for sure. But you guys see what I mean? And it's like that should be an easy question to answer, in my opinion. And for Ruslan, I guess it isn't. Although, again, I think AD is right to just press forward with this, because that is the answer in the end. Like, he seems ashamed of it. He wants to tap dance around it. He doesn't want to say it in those specific words. But in the end, he's saying, yes, I think that it is acceptable that a pastor preach this on Sunday. And that is in itself, I think, honestly, not acceptable.
Well, if I may say, brother, that's the reason that he concedes it that way, is because otherwise it would come back around to bite him, And so that's why he, but this is the best he can do with it for himself, is to unspokenly concede it, reading between the lines. And just for you remembering what John Harris said in that video, that sort of speaks to it, that Ruslan is on the other side of that. And it seems like deep down he knows and ultimately agrees with John Harris in a sense, if you can follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, I certainly do.
So the audience can follow what I'm saying. John Harris's new book is going to be called Christianity and Social Justice, Religions in Conflict. And well, anyway, that's that. So religions in conflict. So that about sums it up, that if it's a different religion and a different gospel, then those of us who see it that way, at some point it has to be approached that way. So after talking about it for months and years, and then at some point things have to move forward with saying, like, okay, we're going to declare that that's something that's outside the church. And people are welcome to come back in, but they can't bring that back in with them, At some point, I think we got to go there with it. And that's a matter of, like, what do we say about teachers who teach it? If we say they're disqualifying themselves, we've done our best to have them be biblically corrected. And at some point, we have to say that they're disqualifying themselves for it. And that needs to be the message, so that people know better. And yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and drop the playback on here so we can move forward a little bit more. But yeah, we've been having a good talk here so far.
And any error that somebody,
and I'm here with you right now, and we could fellowship. And if I was in Vermont, we would probably go grab dinner. If you were in California, I would invite you to have.
So these are So the issues that I'm wrong about are some of these non-essential issues that we have liberty on. We can have unity around.
Yeah. But what I'm saying with you is, I think you're actually coloring outside of the lines of Christian conduct. And I think that's been brought to you before. I think that's brought to you multiple times before, outside of your comment section. That's been brought to you before. So if we're talking about, hey, Southside Rabbi, right, KB and Amin, they came on your platform, or if you did on their platform, I don't know which one it was, and they said, hey, man, you got to stop misrepresenting us, calling us a social justice warrior, right? That really happened. That was something that was brought to you.
And I said, no, I wouldn't stop.
Okay, you said you wouldn't stop, but so those brothers brought that to you. They felt they were misrepresented and slandered. That happened.
Sure.
Okay, and then there was a situation where I believe somebody in your local church came from an SBC. You guys aren't an SBC, but some of this SBC person had this thing.
Do you really want to go here?
Yeah, because I genuinely want to.
Will you pause it real quick?
Somebody comes and then they persuade your elder.
Because when AD was straight up like, and I said I wouldn't stop calling them that, right? Like, what's going on there is that AD, you know, since he's been doing this YouTube thing, he's been careful and he's owned up to mistakes when he's made them, and his yes has been yes and his no has been no, you know. And so he realizes that in front of his audience, like, he has enough credibility where he could just kind of like slip that in there, like, yeah, and I didn't change my mind about it, you know, after talking to them. And so that tells us in the audience, because we've learned, you know, we have this in Christian brotherhood, the agreement that is in Christ. The details of the boundaries are different because it's never perfect, but I have this a lot with CJ, you know, as well. But it's that trust with AD where it's like, okay, so I kind of get what's going on, you know, especially because we've seen Ruslan like say things where he's repeating lies that liars are saying, you know. And so he kind of puts that trust in people too, but he always chooses the wrong people for it.
Yeah, and where I'm kind of at with this particular, the Southside Rabbi story at least, is I don't really know who that is, so I can't really comment, but just you know, knowing that Ruslan kind of comes to the defense of like Chris Broussard and who's the guy we were just talking about, Eric Mason, and some of these others, you know, it makes me wonder, like, I mean, Southside Rabbi might be an SJW. I don't know. He might not, though. I guess I'm not aware, but the conversation doesn't look good so far, I guess is my point.
Yeah, and for me, I've watched AD critique enough people on the topic that if AD hasn't changed his mind, that tells me something, because I know AD on the topic pretty well. And then that translates however it does. Neither here nor there. But I do want to mention, to Sandy's question, is Ruslan a Christian? And yeah, he's a very progressive Christian to the point of like allowing just about anything kind of a thing. If I may just cartoonishly characterize it real quickly, because we've been putting a lot of time into talking about it, so there's plenty of nuance there.
Yeah, we've actually only gotten through like 3.5 minutes of the video. But anyways, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention AD, you know, by having his yes be yes and his no be no, and being accountable to the Bible and accountable to his mistakes when he makes them, you know, and all of that, he's able to just make a claim and it has weight, you know, and it's the opposite of the boy who cried wolf. So just pointing out an example in real life with him.
Absolutely. All right, let's go ahead and get the play pressed here again.
Elder to ask you or position you to step down, and you never finished the rest of the story. And then the only 2 videos I seen you preaching afterwards, which, by the way, Leviticus 17, was it Leviticus 17, Leviticus 27? You did a really good exegesis on that. And I was like, man, that's so dope. He's actually doing exegesis and helping me understand why he believes what he believes. And you're kind of dunking on atheists a little bit. Post that video. So now we have your own elder being confronted and pulled by somebody to the side, saying, hey, AD is reckless with his mouth. He's talking bad about brothers in the faith. That's
Will you pause it real quick?
Okay. So then that happens. And then you have your situation with Kirk Kennedy.
And only because he's about to totally change topics. And I actually agree with Ruslan, his advice to AD just now, where it's like you're exiting scripture a bit and dunking on the atheists some, you know, or as AD and I would call them, pagans, which is anyone who's not a regenerate born-again Christian. Which, not that we always know who that is, but we know that that's what a pagan is. But anyway, yeah, but I agree that when AD does exegesis, it's especially powerful, and he could bring that to the table more often in the fight, and it would fight the fightier, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know, 25 videos about him. You guys went back and forth. Apparently, you guys reconciled. So I'm saying this is brought to you multiple times, AD. Multiple people bring it to you. And now I'm bringing it to you. You've misrepresented me. I feel like you've slandered me, right? So maybe it's not everybody else, AD. Maybe it's not the SBC and the Gospel Coalition and Timothy Keller and John Piper and all these other brothers. Maybe it's you, man. Maybe it's you that needs to do some
Hey, Ruslan, can you stop for a second? You've been.
I want to point out that I guess I don't know anything that AD has said about John Piper or really any of those groups for that matter. But I do know some things
John
that
Piper's
I can
the
say.
person that's the person I made the video about that I took down that you were quoting from earlier.
Right. And so that's why I you know, there's a few things I can say. So the first thing I can say is in regards to the Gospel Coalition, which is that is, I am confident enough to say that that group is run by apostates. I don't think that that necessarily means everybody associated with them is apostates, but they have actively sold out Christians being persecuted in obviously the first world, so it's not severe yet. But here's the thing: if you're not going to stand up before it's severe, then by the time it gets severe, when you start, oh, hey, that's not fair, you can't do that. All right, it's too late, right? You had your chance a couple years ago, you failed. So,
well, I think even the people who are more progressive than us, but still draw boundaries, you know, such as Josh McDowell, I think it is, the younger of the two, you know, the father and son.
Yeah.
And then also, what's her name? I'll look it up real quick in my sidebar here. But they've distanced themselves, I think, from Gospel Coalition and have at least drawn the line that, like, if people are too soft on wokeness, they eventually draw the line. So Lisa Childers. So at first, when she was getting into ministry, it was when wokeness was like first a problem. And I saw her do something that had something to do with Gospel Coalition. And then I just never saw her connected with them since then. So that's all I know. But I'm saying that, like, even people who are less fundamentalist than you and I, people who are more like middle of the road, but still generally orthodox, at least not totally liberal, you know, those people seem to also have. They're not calling them out. They're not really the name callers, you know.
Yeah, but it is true though, right? It's because it's becoming obvious with the Gospel Coalition, right? They are constantly. So in fact, they went as far as to attack and slander pastors James Coates and Arthur Pawlowski up in Canada because they had the audacity to stand up to the Canadian government. Going as far as to say that Coates and Pawlowski slandered the name of Jesus by doing what they did, which I mean that's disgusting in my opinion. Like, you absolutely need to repent for that. That's slander against another brother in the name of think about that. The slander in the name of Jesus. That's rough right there, right? You need to repent of that.
Well, and Jesus very specifically taught about when that would happen to people. And it's happened to people before, you know, with Romanism and such. But now it's starting to happen with people from supposedly Reformed. You know, that's not right. We don't want to see that. And James Coates especially did everything completely tempered and gentle, and with exemplary. That's the word. Everything he did exemplarily.
Yeah, and I know that Arthur Pawlowski, he was a little bit more of a firebrand for sure. So it is important to point out that, like, in the case of James Coates, it's like, you literally have nothing on this man. You have absolutely nothing on this man. But it doesn't matter for the Gospel Coalition; they'll sell him out anyway. And the reason I point out, like, the reason I stress that whole in Jesus's name they slander is because, you know, we always talk about the commandments say, not to take the Lord's name in vain. We always talk about like not saying JD or JC as a cuss word. And that's totally true. You shouldn't do that. It's a violation of that commandment. But that's not actually what it's talking about. What it's talking about is doing what the Gospel Coalition does to people like James Coates, using the name of God in a degrading, devilish way to push forward your own agenda, to use it in a vain fashion, such as saying something like these people are slandering the name of Christ and using the name of Christ to slander these people.
Well, they're media avenues, and this whole globalist agenda, they do things with the media avenues, and we don't know what exactly is a literal infiltrator and what exactly is someone who's like kind of going along with things and is kind of naive, you know. But I think what we can see is spiritually what's happening, and this Marxist spirit, and then there's some kind of struggle to use it for globalism. If it's not the globalism itself, it might be part of a multi-pronged thing that's going on. But we see some stuff going on, and we've got to respond properly, which we'll figure that out as we go.
Absolutely. And I will say, as far as the Piper question is concerned, that one's a little bit more nuanced for sure. I don't think it is okay to honestly vote for the Democratic Party at this point. Now, that does vary. There are certainly some, especially in local elections, Democrats that are actually, like, for example, pro-life and decide to vote individually that way. But the thing is, that's becoming less and less and less the case as time goes on. And at the national scale, that is never the case any longer.
Yeah, and the reason I took it down is because the way he framed it up, really, I thought was sort of like a cop-out to open things up and was a bit of a maneuver. And I don't know what it was. Like, I shouldn't make accusations, right? But that was back when I was rolling with Smokey Saint even, so very different time. But he framed it up as he wouldn't vote for either party for specific reasons. And I don't think he had any reasons for Trump that were too close to the mass murder of babies. But I think there was something about like selling weapons or stuff like that, where it's like, you know, there is stuff sort of like that. But I just think the fact that it seems like the Republicans' job is to, like, for conservatives to not demand more, so they have to like keep us from sort of tipping over the edge and being like, that's it, we're doing something else entirely, we're not tolerating this anymore, you know. And so for like 50 years the Republicans have like kept the people with a capital P, right? Like, what's stopping globalism from just like taking over the United States and like the whole world falling to this global deep state? The people with a capital P. There's nothing else stopping globalism. And the people with a capital P is like, they're lingering behind, you know, there's sort of a lead end to this trailblazing into this brave new world or whatever, right? Just to sort of speak quickly, but dystopia, right? To like forge into this dystopia, there's those who are like right there on the front curve of it, so we call that the left, I guess. And then the Republicans are like making sure that we all kind of keep up in general, even if we're not quite, you know, if we're not quite on the frontier, or at least like not just way back in like being good Christians land, you know, or at least like totally compromised and stuff. I don't know. I think you get what I'm saying, brother.
Yeah, and my main conclusion with Piper is, you know, because I do understand not voting for either. I didn't vote for either in 2016, and I'm not as confident in the fact that I voted for Trump in 2020 as I was in 2020. So I understand there's a lot of nuance with the whole Piper thing, for certain. Obviously that's a conversation for another time, but you know, there were things that I think I don't know. My biggest thing is that I just think you have to be absolutely clear about what it is that you're standing on and why. Like, for example, I don't think that Piper was quite clear enough that he was also standing actively against the Democratic Party. Because that is, I mean, Ruslan actually says, or excuse me, not Ruslan, AD actually says it at some point in this video. I don't think we'll ever get to it because it's near the end. But he says, like, voting for the Democratic Party is the same as voting for the Nazis in my book. And I'm right there with you at this point. 900,000 babies executed a year is, that's basically Nazi stuff. Especially when you start talking about the eugenics policies that they have, as far as getting rid of like people who are mentally handicapped and stuff like that. Yeah, no, that's basically analogous to voting for Nazis for sure. And I think Piper could have been clearer on that, but I do recognize that there is a lot more nuance with Piper. Gospel Coalition, absolutely not. That group is led by apostates, I believe.
And if I may say, it's just like with Republicans and Democrats, it's as simple as like to walk, you have to use 2 feet, It's really, that's the way it works. It's like hopping around on 1 foot is a possibility, but that's what it would be like for the Democrats to try to subject the people with a capital P of the United States to globalism without the help of the Republicans. It would be like hopping around on 1 leg,
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead and jump right back into the video here again. We have hardly gotten through any of it, and that's definitely our fault. But nonetheless, we'll go ahead and power through some more of this here.
Been talking for a long time, and you've been saying a lot of things. So let me ask you a question, Ruslan. Since you seem to know a lot about me,
you didn't answer the question though. Have you
ever
thought that maybe it's you?
Mute.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think about myself and the conduct that what I engage in on YouTube.
Have you ever questioned that your
every single day
out of pocket with the way you speak of by name? Because again, the difference between mocking ideas and mocking theologies or whatever, but you're now attacking people by name. Brothers that have Timothy Keller. I mean, you said that was one of the people that brought you to the Lord. Now he's too woke. Right, John Piper.
Oh yeah, he's absolutely too woke.
So everybody is woke. Everybody, that's some weird like I'm the last tribe. We're the only people that are really saved.
No.
Everybody else is wrong. Vibe.
No.
Just comes off very weird, man.
Yeah, it's what's funny is like it's amazing how many false things that you can say in a short amount of time.
Well,
I have a big
help me understand.
Ruslan, I have one of the biggest tents.
I appreciate it. I'll try to keep this one short, but it's just simply that he's saying like how it's so weird, and it's like, why? Because the world suddenly went like a certain direction where it was okay for mostly peaceful protests to be the burning down of buildings and stuff, like just everything went to total madness, but like still whatever is the world's normal and the world's weird is like we're supposed to like no matter what, we're just supposed to go along with that sort of set of standards. So this is weird, like you're the last tribe kind of stuff. And it's like, also, it's exactly the kind of thing we expect from reading the Bible. So if we actually believe our Bibles and that's our natural worldview, then none of this seems weird because it's like, oh, the Bible said this about what would happen with apostates and false teachers. And it said this about people teaching this kind of doctrine, about covetousness and stuff, and it's like all this stuff is specifically in Scripture. It's not just that it's in Scripture, it's specifically there. And you're on mute here.
Yeah, I was muted there. Sorry. I just wanted to point out there too, the whole mostly peaceful protest thing, they even know that that's false because if you take, like, for example, something like the Unite the Right rally at Charlottesville, right? Where one person got violent, right? Now, I have a lot of problems with everything that happened at Charlottesville, right? But one person who ended up actually being at Unite the Right actually got violent. Now, who all was there? I think there's something like 500 people. What is that? 0.5%, something along those lines. Now, even according to their own statistics, the leftist riots of 2020 were at least 7% of people involved. By the way, that's not even the only one you can do that with. You can take a look at January 6th, again, something that I don't support. And at the least, which would make the argument as good as you possibly could. 40,000 people showed up, and at the most, 2,000 people got into the Capitol. Now, both of those numbers are guaranteed to be wrong, but I'm trying to make the argument for the leftists as powerful as I can possibly make it. That's only 5%. That's still not 7. The point being that even by their own very skewed statistics, these absolutely terrible nation-changing events like Charlottesville and January 6th were not as violent as the race riots from 2020. So that's just a fact. You can do whatever you want with that information, but that's just the facts.
And they're actually calling the Taliban takeover mostly peaceful. I want to say it's maybe it's MSNBC. I thought it was CNN, but let me see if it says here. MSNBC calls it mostly peaceful takeover, and how it's surprisingly peaceful on the ground there and stuff like that. And that's such a twisting of the definitions of what's going on and what the concerns are, but I won't even get either here or there. And then there's one anchor woman, she's all like in a hijab and stuff because she has to be now. And I'm pretty sure she's like traumatized from reading their despicable script as she's saying it. And she says how like they're saying death to America, but at the same time they seem friendly. And then she said how like it's paradoxical or contradictory or something. And as she was saying that, like, it looked like she was working really hard for her face to not crack, And my face will crack emotionally. Like if I say something that matters a lot to me out loud, then like my emotions will crack, or I can't say it. Or then if I do say it, it breaks my, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
And so they're trying to dub it as peaceful and friendly. It's like, it's madness. It's absolute madness. And it's un-American. And we've got to start like drawing that line again. This whole Marxism thing is un-American. This whole like quitters or champions thing is un-American. This whole like well, I don't know, it falls in the Marxist thing, right? But this like, what is this peaceful? They're calling the Taliban peaceful. What is that? It seems like literally it's just about weakening America for a takeover. It seems like that's all that's going on right now, is they're like, let's be weak for a takeover and be taken over.
Yeah, certainly.
I guess I'm way off topic. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. I'm just going to go ahead and press play on here just because I want to power through a little bit more of this before we hop off, because I'm not going to do a part 4. So whatever we get through today is the last that we're going to get through on this particular video. And then if you guys want to watch the rest of it, you'll have to do that on your own time.
Yeah, we should be able to get through all of it that's productive.
Yeah, definitely, because that ends, I think, at like, well, maybe the hour 20 mark. So we might miss a little bit, but it won't be important as long as we get the juicy details here, which we will be able to get, I think.
You could possibly have in the Christian faith, and I get flack for it. I think that if you're a baptized believer and not excommunicated, then I owe you the courtesy of treating you like a brother in the faith.
Okay, but have you
and
extended
well,
that publicly
obviously,
to people?
baptized in the name of the Trinity. That's the key here.
Okay, so you're against the oneness people.
But here's the thing, though. So what?
So help me understand the church. Help me understand the church thing.
Right. So the whole situation with my church, when I was confronted by the other elder, what do you think happened after that? Like, how do you think we handled that?
You stepped down, right? To my knowledge, you stepped down. You said the rest of the story would come out. I was trying to do some videos.
I did step down, but how do you think that was handled? I mean, because you seem to know a lot about it, and so
I don't. I'm asking you. I'm saying, here is a situation. Your own elder confronted you on something inside of your own church
Do you
that
think
you were
if somebody,
pastoring, and then you had to step down for it. You chose to step down for it.
so
And you
if
said you weren't
somebody,
under church discipline. I want to be clear. You said you weren't under church discipline, but I'm saying that happened, and then there's this pattern of people who keep
we'll talk about
confronting
it in a
you, AD, who keep confronting you, and you just kind of nonchalantly brush it off and think that it's okay.
Ruslan,
And you
do
say
you
it's an
think
issue
that
of
if somebody,
tone.
Ruslan, do you think if somebody confronts you about a sin, that automatically means you've sinned?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Right,
I'm
it doesn't.
saying I think
It
you
doesn't.
have sinned. I think
So-
if we pull up the definition of slander, I think you've misrepresented me. That's what I'm telling you.
Right. Okay. Got it. So do you want me to answer the question about what happened at the church?
Yeah. I'm genuinely curious about the church thing.
So what happened at the church was my elder confronted me about my tone, and he said it was wrong to criticize other believers online, no matter what, even if the gospel was at threat, whatever.
Mhm.
Basically, you've criticized other believers online, right, Ruslan?
I've maybe done a video on Kenneth Copeland. I've done a handful of videos.
Other
All right, I just got to point something out real quick at this particular portion because it irritated me that Ruslan said this. That's not true. That's not accurate. Ruslan has done more than a few videos talking about other believers. And I don't even necessarily think that that's a problem per se. Obviously, it depends on a few of the details, right? But James White, for example, he's done a bunch of videos on. I think there's like 5 or something along those lines that Ruslan has done on.
Why was James White preaching against forgiveness and preaching in favor of covetousness?
No. So I think that his
Sorry.
primary beef with him is Calvinist doctrine because he had Leighton Flowers on, but I'm not 100% sure. I guess.
But I was just making a point about like who is Ruslan even criticizing if like you just roll with it when it comes to unforgiveness and covetousness. That's just no harm, no foul. Apparently, that's how you care about people. Is just like if they're being peddled covetousness and unforgiveness, then you don't bother to speak any truth into that, and that's how you care for them.
Yeah, and to be fair, the other things that are one of the specific things that exist on Ruslan's channel is Eric Mason responding to James White and Jeff Durbin on Ruslan's channel. And the title definitely indicates that Ruslan is on Eric Mason's team. Now, he tries to parse out the nuances a little bit more in the video itself, but, to a certain extent, you shouldn't really... people say don't judge a book by its cover, but there are a few judgments you can make by its cover. For example, that's the big thing he wanted you to take from this video. Not the nuances that he tries to parse out, but the fact that he thought that there... And in fact, let me just read you one of the titles. Let me look up one of them, and I'll show you one of the titles so you guys know what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah, if I may give some fair context as someone who's, done a lot of different art pieces and put names on them or whatever, of different sorts, like songs or whatever. Sometimes I think the thumbnail of the video, well, I've done videos too, right, with thumbnails. And the thumbnail in the title, it's sort of like clickbait. It's not necessarily the exact same thing, but it's like... it's the question, and then the video itself is the answer. So it's a call and response kind of thing, which happens a lot of different ways in art. So it's so the thumbnail and title may be like, this is the question. If you're interested in this, you're going to watch it. And then the answer might be like a surprise on that, And so I don't know if it's too fair to like not give him what he says during the video because of the title.
Well, that's fair enough, I guess. I don't know. I think it's a little bit of like when you consider everything in the context, I do think it does kind of show kind of like what he wanted to be gathered from this. Because in the end, he doesn't refute what Eric Mason has to say. And of course, like I said, he's got his own videos responding to Dr. James White as well, which of course he's able to do. That's fine. But the main point is just to say that, there is sort of this unequal scale, to quote our good friend Ruslan here. And also just, he's just outright wrong when he says that he doesn't call out believers. There's obviously the ones that he just mentioned, but
Well,
then there's also, like I said, James White.
Ruslan he also called out AD for not doing like more types of injustice topics, but he's like not even helping people who are being falsely preached to be unforgiving and covetous. It's like that really hurts people's lives. Like, I know people who, because of this social justice stuff, like, they approached every situation with resentment, and then things went worse for them, not in like extreme tragedy, but like eventually they lost a job over it. Whereas if they'd handled things with balance, they didn't want to lose that job. That we were all like family at that place. But the covetousness and unforgiveness, the resentfulness, it really hurts people. And so, and that's what I think it all comes down to. Like, if we dig into the teachings, like, it's not really a matter of the title compared to what he says or whatever, but ultimately, like, he's just letting that slide as if it doesn't exist. But that's not the truth, it does exist. And it's like, I think it's also a different belief system, a different worldview. So it assumes that the Bible is not true. So that's another huge problem. Unforgiveness, covetousness, assuming the Bible's not true. Those are really important things. They're not just like little side issues.
Yeah, certainly. And by the way, there's a few other names that do come to mind as well. Like, so for example, he called out Brandon Tatum. Now, I know Brandon Tatum is not actually a believer, but the point is that he did call him out. He's called out Stephen Smith, missionary Stephen Smith. In fact, that's one of the videos I aim to respond to, because it's Ruslan responding to Stephen Smith, responding to Alan Parr. So I'm going to go ahead and just continue the response section there by responding to Ruslan.
Maybe I'll respond to whatever you said, because it's probably the same Alan Parr video that I've gone off about a few times, and so I could use to get in on that chain. But well, continue. I lost my train of thought. I was going to be real quick at something, but
well, yeah. And so the point just being that, like, when he says he doesn't, call out other believers or just people in general, that's not true. That's not true.
Oh, the Bible says that we're supposed to judge within rather than without. So, like, we are supposed to, like, be the voice of reason within the church, but then we understand that those who are not regenerated, they do things by a different standard. So we have a different standard of how we conduct grace and compassion. And, it's like, if we held unbelievers to the same standard that we hold each other to, we'd be harping on them nonstop, whereas with each other, we can hold each other to that standard. And hopefully it's not nonstop. It's just occasionally,
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this again. I'm going to try and power through a lot of it again, but I wanted to clarify that, because that is Ruslan misrepresenting what it is that he does. And I think it needs to be corrected.
People that profess Christ.
I genuinely try not to criticize people by name and dunk on people by name. Like if you look at the vast majority, I think I did one video on Bethel, one video on Kenneth Copeland, a handful of videos. By and large,
but you've done it, right?
On my platform. I've done maybe 2 videos. Yes.
You've done it. Okay, got it. So you've done 2 videos of criticizing other believers by name. So he said that you can't criticize other believers no matter what. Like it's a sin no matter what, which I think is completely preposterous.
He said that he said that in terms of, like, you can't criticize Kenneth Copeland, you can't criticize, I don't know, Joel Osteen, like Creflo Dollar. Like he said anyone that claims the title of Christ, or did he say people with coloring within the lines of essential orthodoxy?
So he was talking about people that profess faith, people that have orthodoxy, I guess.
Mhm.
But the thing is, obviously, that's in the eye of the. There's obviously some nuance there and some wiggle room. But the point is, though, that this is all nonsense anyway.
There's specific people that you talked about that he was talking about, like were there specific names where he said, hey, nah, these guys are solid Bible teachers. You're attacking solid Bible teachers.
Yeah.
This is inappropriate because these are solid men of God. And there were specific names, not a hypothetical, and you can't ever say anything negative about a Christian ever. Was there specific people that they found that this is inconsistent? You shouldn't speak about people this way.
So here's the deal. So I don't remember the details. I think there were some specific names that especially concerned him, but he gave a blanket statement. This is all irrelevant though, because here's how it was handled, Ruslan. We couldn't figure it out between us because it's obviously preposterous to say it's a sin to criticize other brothers by name. That's a ridiculous standard. The Bible does not. Jesus didn't meet that standard. Paul didn't meet that standard. All of that. So I said, I don't agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
I've heard your explanation. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I didn't agree with him, so we couldn't figure it out. So what we did was what the Bible says to do. We brought every family, every male leader in the church, not just leader in the church, just every male member of the church.
How big was the church?
What's that?
How big was the church?
It was small. It was probably 6-7 families, something like that.
Okay, so like anyway, a couple dozen people, like 50 people.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So anyway, the point is, so there was like 6 guys in the room. So it was people in the church, and then a non-member male that we both respected, an ex-pastor in the area, right? We both respected him, and they were going to mediate this dispute with us. Mm-hmm. And so then what happened after that is that every single person to the man said, AD is in the right. You're wrong, Chris. You're wrong. That's what his name was, Chris. And so Chris said, I don't care if I'm wrong. I'm going to step down. I can't do ministry with AD anymore. So what I said was, I don't want the church to blow up over this. So why don't I just stop being a pastor since you can't do ministry with me, even though everybody disagrees with you? I think this was a mistake in hindsight, Ruslan. So I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done this, but I did that out of, I want the church to move forward. That's how it happened.
Okay. And so
people confronted me,
did you leave
and then everyone agreed with me, and that's how it was handled.
Okay. Did you leave the church?
So I didn't leave the church. I stayed with the church. I was planning on staying there. But unfortunately, the elder decided to quit anyway, a week later.
Anyway. And so the church dissolved.
That's right.
Okay.
So
do you not see any? Do you not see any correlation of, maybe not a broad general? You can't ever talk about Christians. I know that's how you interpreted that. But do you not see any correlation of you going against solid, godly?
Of course, there's a correlation.
And I'm saying, hey, AD, this is not indicative of how an elder of a church should speak online. Outside of tone, no, this is not okay. You don't see any correlation there that this was what happened.
Right. There is, of course, there's a correlation because that's what his complaint was. But the reality is that these aren't gods we're talking about here. These aren't sacred cows that cannot be criticized.
Agreed.
This is totally fair game. And if you watch the videos that I was doing at the time, they were super respectful in general. So the reality is that he just didn't like that I was criticizing his heroes. And I think that that's often the reality here. You don't like that I'm criticizing you, Ruslan, and I can understand that. I don't like when people criticize me, but it doesn't mean
have you
that
gotten more disrespectful since then. Like, has your content intensified and your level of disrespect?
My content has changed, but I wouldn't characterize it as more disrespectful. That's a very weaselly thing to kind of slip in there.
You're like the Christian Crowder. Like that's kind of like your shtick.
I've never watched an episode of Crowder, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But
to be fair, Crowder is a professing Christian. So just want to clarify that. You can't really be. That would be kind of like saying you're like the Catholic Matt Walsh. It's like, well, Matt Walsh is a Catholic. So.
Well, I mean, he does a secular show, so.
Well, Crowder will talk often about faith. In fact, I think on Wednesdays he used to.
Yeah, but there's just the standard isn't Christian standard, and so it just is what it is. It's not Christian standard, so it's not a Christian show.
I don't know. I think by Ruslan standards, it certainly would have to be, considering everything else that he's saying.
I won't argue with that.
We'll go ahead and jump right back into that because I just wanted to clarify the record there to say that like he does profess Christ, which I think for Ruslan that definitely should be a big deal considering the fact. And it also Crowder doesn't have any like weird like denial of the divinity of Christ things going on like Brandon Tatum does, just for the record as well.
And we may have already passed the point where it was no longer a functional discussion. I don't remember what the word is, but productive, because It might have been when he wasn't willing to honestly address the question about forgiveness and covetousness. And then, like, the honesty of the discussion went away, and now it's sort of tactics to hide, because when the person brings up the heart of the problem, and that's the whole reason you get together, and then you just dodge it and play games for how much longer is left in this video, the head in their video, like it's still an hour and a half of playing games when the heart of the issue was already brought up, and you chose to manipulatively dodge it instead of just honestly face it and face whatever music comes with that, And that's just not the Christian way to do it. And that's what I was going to mention, is that AD's church, he did make a mistake. And I think, this is a much larger ministry, and there was a need for AD here. So I think this is where God wanted AD. But it doesn't justify AD's mistake. Like, the men in the church did the right thing. They sided with the Bible. And so they said that AD was in the right. And then he yielded for the guy who was in the wrong, who caused the problem anyway. And that's just not the right thing to do. Like, you took up, even though it's a tiny church, he took up the role of pastor, and he totally dropped the ball on it. But he knows and he repents. And that's exactly what we expect from a good Christian brother. And, but yeah, the way Ruslan tried to turn it around, like, see, all these people disagree with you. It's like, well, actually, the proper church process, the agreement of the church was with AD as it should have been because of the Bible, and AD dropped the ball, So it's all kind of moot now.
Yeah, I feel like there was one other thing that he was about to say here that I wanted to get to, but I might be misremembering.
There may be something else. Yeah.
I'm going to let it play for a little bit longer. If it's not there, then it's not there. Because I could be misremembering, but I feel like there was one other thing I really wanted to address. And then we'll go ahead and drop out here in a moment. If not, we are at the hour and 30-minute mark, so it might be a good idea anyway. And it doesn't appear there's too many people watching anymore either. So, but anyways, let's go ahead and jump back into this real quick.
From what I understand of Crowder, I would take high offense to that.
Why would you? That's your. I mean, it's literally like the same kind of humor, and it's like the jokes and the mockery and all that kind of stuff. It's the same vibe. It works from a YouTube thing. I get it, AD. Like, it works from a YouTube thing. I think it's wise. It's true. Again, I'm just saying, man, it's very difficult to say that this is indicative of how an elder of a church should carry themselves online. The way you speak about people.
Why?
Because you're misrepresenting and you're slandering people.
I'm not misrepresenting.
Okay.
See, because when I
did you misrepresent Kirk Kennedy? Did you slander him?
Yeah, so the things I said about him were, there was a lot of truth there, but I called him a liar, which went a step above, which I said, I think I said literally, nobody should trust him in anything or something like that. And that was unfair. I'm sorry?
So you crossed the line.
Yeah, I crossed the line with
Kirk Kennedy. And all 20 videos, right?
I love how you throw the number in there. What are you trying to say, Bruce? Are you trying to say I'm
saying, bro, there's 12 videos about me. That's mad impressive. Like, respect to you as a content creator.
What I've noticed about
as a Christian elder, I'm kind of like, bro, like,
I've noticed, people, you and others from this kind of, more, social justice-y perspective, they really have this laser focus on the number of videos that people produce about them. I've heard this a number of times.
I'm strictly speaking as a content creator. The number of videos is irrelevant. I'm saying you made a lot of videos about a lot of people. Those 20 vanished. You crossed the line. You just agreed to cross on the line, right?
With Kirk Kennedy, yeah, not with everything, but yeah, definitely that last video crossed the line.
Have you ever crossed the line before that? Any other times you say, man, I definitely crossed the line?
Yeah, there was one other time I said something.
There's only one, so just one other time you've crossed the line.
What are you asking me? In a video?
Yes, in a video. What are you talking about? We're on YouTube. We're talking about YouTube stuff. Yes.
Right, but the way you ask questions, Ruslan, to be honest, it's very weaselly, and even the way you answer the questions is quite weaselly sometimes as well. So you'll slip it. Hold on. You'll slip in something at the end. It's like, so you've got.
I did like that because that's something that I've been pointing out a lot of times in these last 3 videos, right? That Ruslan, he just doesn't answer things straightforward, and he doesn't really ask them in a objective manner either.
Well, and he's a gamer. Look at his face right here. Like, he's been like caught in the act, and it's all fair game, and it's like, it's fun, it may not be malicious, but it's like, but that's not the proper way to be doing this. And AD just got to the heart of the issue a minute ago, and he dodged it. And I know I'm still on that, but that's the whole thing, right? That's the whole shaboot and caboodle or something.
Yeah, definitely. I'm probably not going to let it go much longer than 5 minutes of their video time, if that. But let's jump back into it real quick.
Well, I want to mention one other thing about him. If we look at Ruslan's shirt, I came into the chat being like, love what Jesus does. Or you could say did because of, the victory in the past. But either way, like, love what you do. That's like, that creeps me out as far as like, that's not a Christian way to do inspirational speaking,
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead and jump right back here into this again.
And more disrespectful over time, right? I'm like,
Okay.
no, I haven't gotten more disrespectful.
Your content has intensified. When I saw you,
it definitely has intensified.
When I saw you walk through Leviticus, I was like, man, I legitimately learned something from you. That was really dope. And you talked about the debate between.
I thought I don't teach from the Bible, Ruslan. Didn't you say that like 15 minutes ago?
You have 4 videos that I've seen you reference the Bible and exegete scripture.
4 out of 12. That's pretty good odds right there, buddy.
I'm not talking about the videos about me. I'm saying just scrolling up your timeline. I saw the video on Matthew 18, I think, and the video on Leviticus, and I just kept looking. I didn't see a ton of Bible study stuff. So I mean, it's just interesting as an elder.
So let me make sure I understand your point. Your point is because I don't have a Bible verse in the title, then that means I don't preach from the Bible or teach from the Bible.
How often do you preach from the Bible? Maybe I'm ignorant. Help me understand. How often do you preach from the Bible?
In many, many videos. I mean,
so you
definitely most. I don't want to say like 90% or 80%.
51% of your videos you exegete scripture.
At least, yeah.
Okay, respect. Okay.
Exegete scripture, though. See, this is the thing about your questions, though, Ruslan. They're kind of weaselly. Like, do I practice exegesis in those? Am I in the Greek? No, I don't.
The way you would on a Sunday. Do you teach through the Bible? The way you did when you were an elder at church. Do you teach the Bible on your YouTube channel?
No, because my channel is not preaching.
Okay.
Do you understand the difference between preaching and a YouTube channel, Ruslan?
You have a channel. You have a channel about social justice. Fair enough. That's your niche on YouTube. I understand. It's a good content strategy. I'm not trying to be weaselly. I'm genuinely saying, AD, you do this well in this regard. I'm saying I think this is incongruent as a follower of Jesus to be on YouTube making
doing
a
social justice
ministry that's primarily against stuff and against other Christians. I think that's very incongruent. And I'm saying specifically with me, I can't speak for anybody else. Specifically with me, you've misrepresented me. I don't appreciate it. I'm not a liberal. I'm not a woke avatar, so on and so forth. I don't think that's a reasonable assessment of me. And I know you would say, well, that's what you are, regardless of what you think you are. Okay, but and I'm saying, hey, but you've crossed the line before. You've crossed the line before. This has been brought to you before, and you're kind of just brushing it off, my brother. Like you're really just like, meh.
Okay, let me ask you a question, Ruslan. Okay. Why would you characterize me apologizing and repenting to Kirk Kennedy, and then asking him, hey, maybe you want me to take these videos down, then doing that?
All right, I think I was misremembering. I think we've gotten through all the good content, so we're going to go ahead and end it here. This is going to be my last response video to this particular, or review video, or whatever you want to call it, to this particular episode of AD's show, or whatever you want to call that, I guess, as well. So I appreciate you guys. Good.
I was going to ask you something, if I may, about what you think about Ruslan being called a woke avatar. Because if I'll be very clear, like that's exactly what AD has said. And I think it's specifically like he's had a discussion like this with Ruslan before. This is not their first one. And so it was somewhere along the line, he's like, if you check out my Ruslan content, then you'll really learn a lot about how to handle all sorts of discussions with all sorts of social justice people, And so, like, he's a woke avatar. Like, but it wasn't, like, merely some empty insult. It was, like, an honest context and stuff, but it is still rude. So just your thoughts on that from what you do know. And I know you weren't there for it, but
yeah, I don't think that's personally 100% accurate. I think Ruslan is certainly not quite as woke as the woke church can get, and so to place him as sort of the woke avatar, I think is giving him a little bit too much credit. To me, he seems almost more representative of lukewarm modern day youthful Christians. Very naive, very uninterested in holiness, very I want to make the Bible kind of work for me kind of thing. Very pragmatic in the sense of they want the practical teachings, not necessarily the deep teachings. That's kind of how I see Ruslan.
Yeah, and then I hear you about how you see him. I don't know if you're quite hearing what what AD's saying, because you suggested he's less of a woke avatar because he's not as extreme as some people. But that's sort of the point. Like, if you can only face the most extreme absurdity, then you're not really able to help your friend down the street. You know, that's why Ruslan's the woke avatar and not someone like Eric Mason. But instead, it's Ruslan, you know? Because anyone can like refute some of the super racist stuff Eric Mason says, or like, you know, you see the difference, right?
Yeah, I definitely get what you mean for sure.
But you might undercredit Ruslan's sort of wokishness too. It's sort of like you know, there's some stuff that is fundamentalists, like we've learned certain boundaries matter. And I think this woke thing is new. And I think there's a new fundamentalist standard regarding this woke thing. And you're just not quite up with the times yet, but you'll get there, you know?
Well, and I'm totally open to that being the case too, because I like I said, I know that there is certain things that do paint me with somewhat of a bias, certainly, such as the specific generation I've grown up in, some of the culture I've grown up in. Obviously, I have in ways not 100% analogous or even 50% analogous, but in ways I have a similar story to Ruslan, and some other stuff like that. So there's. I do understand that there is some bias that comes from my part when it comes to whether or not I'm judging Ruslan correctly.
And then I could say like a bit of summary of what I would like sort of taken away from it, and then I can drop out and you can do a closing rant or something. Well, another thing though is I could linger if you want to touch base real quick on some of your overlays or something, and we can look at stuff real quick, and I can ask a few quick questions, and if there's time, we can dig deeper or not. But it would help me if we could talk real quick and see what you're thinking on that.
I may not have time for that tonight. I don't work tomorrow. If you'd like to meet up at some point and talk tomorrow, that certainly would be possible.
Yeah, let's work that out tomorrow.
For sure.
So we can just email about it. So what I would like taken away from this and the John Harris video, where it's more like, look, when we're calling out teachers, it's a matter of like, what does the Bible tell us to do regarding correct and false teaching and correct and false teachers? And then we're just living out what the Bible tells us to do regarding teachers, It's not about like any personal judgment or anything outside of that. That's not the point of calling out teachers and all that. But also John Harris, I think especially in the shorter video, he sort of honed in on his case for and when I drop out, I'll put the links into side chat for these two videos. But he honed in on wokeness being its own religion, and that's a pretty wide spiritual topic, but I do think that's something important to note, is like there's spiritual things happening, and our battle is against spirits, not against flesh and blood. And sometimes we're just like assessing a person and regarding a doctrine and stuff, and it's like we're really supposed to have eyes to see, so all this spiritual stuff, we should not just be oblivious to it, but with that sort of set as the context of what I'm saying here, what I'd like sort of taken from it is that focus on like disregarding the Bible, disregarding, the Jesus of Christianity, preaching unforgiveness and covetousness, and how at least being unbiblical, these doctrines of covetousness and unforgiveness, those are fundamentals to what wokeism is. And so I'd like how this discussion sort of broke down on that point. And that's what I'd like taken away from it on your part, CJ, if I may say so. And with that, everyone just trust Messiah.
Absolutely. And so with that, I will go ahead and give you guys my little end of the stream spiel for today. I'll go ahead and start by responding to this comment from Sandy C. What content will I have next? So coming up, if you guys are interested, we are going to be doing a litany of things. Actually, I want to be responding to a video from Ruslan where he talked about why he's so, quote, hard on conservatives. I want to also be responding to another video from Ruslan talking about, which is also a response to a video from Alan Parr talking about certain people and whether or not they're false teachers, namely Andy Stanley, Francis Chan, John Piper, and one other person who I'm forgetting at the moment. So that's going to be coming up here soon. I want to do a response to some of the late Exodus date arguments that come from Dr. David Falk. I also want to do a response to some slander that has been pointed my way from Dr. David Falk that originally he decided to keep in private email, so I didn't really care to talk about it, but now he's decided to make public, so I am going to talk about it. Some other things that I knew I was going to do here soon, so what else have I got? Sorry. We're going to do a video, series of videos here really soon talking about Ecclesiastes. I want to do a video on depression and suicide from a biblical perspective, a video on addiction from a biblical perspective, a video on pornography and the role of men in lust, a video on patriarchy from a biblical perspective. So I have actually tons and tons of topics that are lined up here in the near future. At least one of those topics will be happening tomorrow. I don't really know which one yet, but I'll make sure I have that decided probably by tonight, if not by tomorrow morning, and then I'll get the thumbnail and all that up for you guys and all that kind of stuff. But lots of cool content actually coming up here. As far as interviews, the only one I have set in stone right now is the only one I have set in stone right now is a conversation with Pastor Phil Fox on being Native American and Christian. There's a couple others that I'm working on at the moment, but we just don't have full time to get everything set up yet. So we haven't been able to. And as a result, I'm not sure whether or not they're actually going to happen because, as you guys are, some of you at least are aware, I have actually decided that I wanted to do certain things here, have certain conversations. And we were talking and it seems like everything was going to go through, but we couldn't get things scheduled. And then it fell through. And then I ended up getting burned because I told you guys we were going to have this conversation and it was premature on my part. Right. And there's no one to blame there except myself. But the point is, the point is that I end up really it's not so much that I get burned, but I burn you guys. Right. Because the guests didn't do anything. They hadn't got their schedule set in stone, so they couldn't commit to me. But I move forward as if they were commitments. So I'm not doing that anymore, and I'm waiting until we actually have commitments. But nonetheless, there are a few things we're working on as far as plans. Now, I also have a couple debates on other channels coming up. I'll be debating Sky Out on whether or not the Bible teaches a literal young earth on Standing for Truth's channel. And I believe that's going to be September the 1st, if I'm not mistaken. And then I'm also going to be debating Praise I Am That I Am on the question of whether or not the conquests of Canaan were actually hyperbolized. And that is also going to be on Standing for Truth channel. And I believe that is going to be on the 8th. We have a few other debates we're currently working on that are not actually quite. Hang on, flip those around. The praise one is on the 1st. The other one is on the 8th. There's a couple other debates we're working on that we might actually hopefully get officialized here soon. And today I can announce for the first time that I'm going to have a second conversation with Rob Rowe December 29th, and we will be debating whether or not the Bible allows for death before the fall. So lots of cool content coming up here soon. And what else I'll say here as we leave is this. If you guys like that content, if you're interested, if you like this video, please consider liking and sharing this video, and please consider subscribing and hitting that bell so you get notified every time we go live. We certainly do appreciate anybody who thinks that this content is worth it, who wants to watch these videos. And if you actually think that I'm worth making this into a career of some kind, please do consider also giving to my Patreon. I do have a Patreon, and I aim to make not only apologetics, but also some of the other stuff I do, such as my news show on the other channel and stuff like that, into a career. So if you guys think that this content is worth it and are not troubling yourselves at all, please do consider giving to the Patreon there. Also, you can follow me on a whole bunch of different social media platforms. I personally recommend Minds, Gab, or Parler because you need to do your part to help us fight these social media overlords. But I am also on Facebook and Twitter if you have those as well. Just type in the Synagogue. You'll be able to find me on any of those. Same way you're going to find me on BitChute, Rumble, YouTube, or Patreon. So I'm not very creative. I just use the same name over and over and over again. Although I do have different display names, but nonetheless, you guys get the idea. So if you want to go ahead and follow us there, thank you for doing that. Yes, Sandy C. Rob Rowe from Sentinel Apologetics. It's actually going to be the second time I'm debating him. And I also had him on this channel for a conversation once. So, I've had some back and forth with Rob before. But nonetheless, that's what we got for the future. And I appreciate you guys for being here. The one thing that I will say is that the best thing that you can do for this particular video, even more so than liking, sharing, and subscribing, is actually watching as much of it as you possibly can, because that's what does the most for the algorithm, more so than me having a lot of subs, a lot of likes, or a lot of shares. So while I appreciate you doing all those things, watching the majority of the video is the best thing you can do for the algorithm. Also, I appreciate you, Sandy, for your prayers. Prayers are, of course, prayers from the genuine brothers and sisters in Christ are, of course, the best things that we can get from anybody, right? So I certainly appreciate that tremendously. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here, guys. We'll be back at it tomorrow. Shalom. Thank you very much for being here. And if the Lord wills and tarries, we'll see you here soon.